You didn't know because you didn't ask. You saw a black woman in first class and assumed I was the problem. I didn't know you were.
Flight attendant Marcus Webb, employee number 63492 with 8 years at the airline, walked through first class and stopped cold when he saw Dr. Amara Johnson, a black woman in seat 1A. He approached her aggressively, accused her of using someone else's upgrade, and demanded to see her boarding pass in a tone he never used with white passengers. And when Dr. Johnson showed him her boarding pass, proving she had paid $1,850 for the first-class ticket, he called it irregular and summoned airport security to have her forcibly removed from the aircraft. Security Officer Linda Chen boarded the aircraft, reviewed Dr. Johnson's valid first-class boarding pass, and nevertheless sided with the flight attendant, questioning why Dr. Johnson was being difficult and suggesting the ticket could have been obtained fraudulently. Ignoring multiple passengers who stated Dr. Johnson had been seated quietly working on her laptop, Chen ordered her to stand up immediately or face physical removal. And when Captain Robert Mitchell emerged from the cockpit, he also immediately backed his flight attendant, all because Dr. Amara Johnson was a black woman. What they didn't know was that they had just racially profiled a federal prosecutor with 12 years of civil rights litigation experience, that their coordinated lies about Dr. Johnson being disruptive were being destroyed by video evidence from multiple witnesses, and that their decision to remove a black woman from first class based purely on the color of her skin would end with a $1.5 million lawsuit, 3 destroyed careers, and a viral video with 58 million views that would become a case study in institutional racism. Dr. Amara Johnson had boarded Flight 6284 from Chicago to Atlanta at 5:30 p.m., 90 minutes before the scheduled departure. At 38 years old, Dr. Johnson was a senior federal prosecutor in the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, returning from a week of depositions in a high-profile discrimination case. She carried a leather briefcase containing confidential legal
documents, witness statements, and court filings. Sensitive materials that required the privacy of first class to review without prying eyes. She'd paid for seat 1A with her personal credit card, $1,850 for the 2.5-hour flight, because DOJ policy didn't cover premium seating, even when handling classified case materials. After depositions that had run 12 hours a day for 5 straight days, she needed the space to decompress and prepare her closing arguments. Dr. Johnson settled into the aisle seat wearing tailored black slacks, a cream silk blouse, and a blazer. Her locks were pulled back into a professional bun. She pulled out her laptop, opened an encrypted case file on employment discrimination, and began reviewing testimony transcripts. Around her, other first-class passengers boarded, a white businessman in 2A already on his phone, an elderly white couple in row 3 arguing about their connection, a white woman in 1B scrolling through her tablet. Dr. Johnson didn't look up. She'd learned over nearly 4 decades that existing as a black woman in premium spaces, boardrooms, courtrooms, first-class cabins, often drew unwanted scrutiny. So she kept to herself, stayed professional, and hoped for an uneventful flight. Marcus Webb started his pre-flight service at 6:15 p.m. He'd been a flight attendant for 8 years, the last 3 on international first-class routes, and he prided himself on maintaining standards in the cabin. He knew the type of passengers who belonged there: corporate executives, wealthy retirees, celebrities, frequent flyers he recognized by face. When he reached row 1 and saw Dr. Johnson, a black woman, dressed professionally but working intently on her laptop, he stopped mid-stride. His eyes narrowed. "Excuse me," Webb said sharply, standing directly in front of her with his arms crossed. "Can I see your boarding pass?" Dr. Johnson looked up, her expression neutral, but her internal alarm bells ringing. She'd been asked this question before on other airlines, always by flight attendants who seemed surprised by her presence in premium seating, but never this early, never this aggressively. "Is there a problem?" she asked calmly, her prosecutor's training kicking in. Stay measured, document everything. Don't give them ammunition. I need to verify you're in the correct seat, Webb said, his tone carrying an edge sharp enough that the businessman in 2A glanced over. The woman in 1B paused her scrolling. Dr. Johnson reached into the seat pocket and pulled out her boarding pass. She handed it to Webb without comment, watching his face carefully. The boarding pass clearly showed Seat 1A, First Class, Dr. Amara Johnson, confirmation number, paid ticket.
So what happened after the trial? Officer Brian Matthews, the senior officer who conducted the stop, was terminated from the Riverside Heights Police Department. Officer David Chen was reinstated and promoted. He now heads the department's new Community Relations Division, working to rebuild trust between police and communities of color. Margaret Patterson faced no legal consequences. Calling 911 even for racist reasons isn't a crime. But after her pattern of calls was exposed in court, many of her neighbors stopped speaking to her. Some called for her to move. Eventually, she did. The Riverside Heights Police Department implemented mandatory implicit bias training for all officers. They also created a new policy. Any resident who makes more than 3 unsubstantiated suspicious person calls will be flagged, and their future calls will be evaluated more carefully before officers are dispatched. It's not perfect, but it's a start. As for Marcus and Jessica, they're still together. In fact, they got engaged 6 months after the trial. They're planning to move to a different neighborhood, one where Marcus doesn't have to wonder if someone's going to call the police on him for existing. But Marcus has also become an activist. He speaks at schools, community centers, and police training sessions about his experience. He tells his story so that others know they're not alone. In one of his speeches, Marcus says, "What happened to me isn't unique. It happens every single day to Black people, to Latino people, to anyone who doesn't fit someone's narrow definition of belonging. But here's what I learned. Staying silent doesn't keep you safe. It doesn't make the problem go away. The only way things change is if we speak up, if we fight back, if we demand better. I fought back, and I won. Not just for me, but for everyone who comes after me." And that's the story of Marcus Thompson and the day his life changed. But really, it's bigger than that. It's a story about all of us, about the assumptions we make, about the biases we hold, about the systems that perpetuate inequality. It's a story about accountability and change and the long, difficult fight for justice. So what can you do? What can we all do? First, educate yourself. Learn about racial profiling, about the history of policing in communities of color, about implicit bias. Knowledge is power. Second, speak up. If you see something that's wrong, say something. Don't be a bystander. Third, support organizations and activists who are doing this work. People like Simone Brooks, who fight these cases every day. People like Marcus, who turn their trauma into advocacy. And finally, examine your own biases. We all have them. The question is, what are we going to do about them? Thank you for watching this story. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. If this story impacted you, please share it. Please talk about it. Please don't let it end here. Drop a comment below telling me what you think. And if you've experienced something similar, know that I see you, I hear you, and your story matters. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss future stories. We've got more important conversations coming your way. This is about justice. This is about change. This is about doing better. Until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of each other.
At the front of the plane, Webb picked up the intercom phone and called the gate, not bothering to lower his voice enough. "This is Marcus in first class on flight 6284. I have a passenger in 1A who I need security to check out." The gate agent's voice crackled back. "What's the issue?" "I think there might be a problem with this ticket," Webb said. "Does she have a boarding pass?" "Yes, but something doesn't seem right about it." "Is it the correct name, seat, and flight?" "Yes, but—" "Marcus, if her boarding pass is valid and matches her ID, I'm not sure what you want us to verify." Webb bristled. "Just send security. I have concerns about this passenger." He hung up and returned to Dr. Johnson, who was still seated calmly, laptop open, doing absolutely nothing wrong. "Ma'am," Webb announced loud enough for the entire cabin to hear, "security is coming to verify your ticket." Dr. Johnson closed her laptop slowly and looked directly at him. "Security is coming because I'm sitting in a seat I paid for? Security is coming because I've requested verification of your boarding credentials." "Verification of what?" Dr. Johnson asked, her voice still calm but now carrying the prosecutorial edge she used with hostile witnesses. "You've examined my boarding pass. It's valid. My name is on it. The seat assignment is correct. What exactly needs to be verified?" The woman in 1B spoke up. "This is ridiculous. She showed you her ticket. It's obviously legitimate. Leave her alone." Webb shot her a look. "Ma'am, this doesn't concern you." "It concerns all of us," the businessman in 2A said, his voice rising. "You're harassing a passenger who clearly has a valid ticket. I've been sitting right here. She's done nothing wrong. She's been working quietly on her laptop since she boarded." Webb's face flushed. "Everyone needs to stay out of this. Security will handle it." Dr. Johnson sat back in her seat, her hands visible on the armrests, her expression calm but her mind racing through legal precedents. She knew what was coming. She knew that when security arrived, this would either de-escalate or explode. She also knew that multiple passengers were now watching, several recording, all witnesses to what was rapidly becoming a textbook case of racial profiling.
The plane was still at the gate. The door was open. And Marcus Webb had just made a decision that would cost him everything. Airport security officer Linda Chen boarded the plane 4 minutes later, her hand already resting on her radio. She walked straight to row 1, where Marcus Webb stood with his arms crossed, looking vindicated that backup had arrived. Chen was an 11-year veteran of airport security, and she'd responded to hundreds of passenger disputes. In her experience, when flight attendants called security, there was usually a problem passenger who needed to be removed. "What's the situation here?" Chen asked, directing her question to Webb, not to Dr. Johnson. Webb jumped in immediately. "This passenger is refusing to cooperate and causing a disturbance." Chen turned to Dr. Johnson with an expression that showed she'd already made up her mind about who was in the wrong. "Ma'am, why are you causing problems?" she asked, her tone already hostile. Dr. Johnson looked up at the security officer and kept her voice level and precise. "I'm not causing problems. I have a valid first-class boarding pass for this seat. This flight attendant has questioned my right to be here without any legitimate cause." She reached for her boarding pass, which Webb was still holding, took it from his hand and offered it to Chen along with her driver's license. Chen took both and glanced at them for perhaps 3 seconds. The boarding pass clearly showed Dr. Johnson's name, 1A, first class, paid ticket, correct flight number. Her driver's license matched perfectly. Everything was in order. "That doesn't give you the right to argue with crew," Chen said dismissively, handing the documents back. Dr. Johnson felt her jaw tighten, but maintained her composure. "I'm not arguing. I'm sitting in my assigned seat. I showed him my valid ticket. That should have been the end of it." Chen's eyes narrowed.
Privacy to review sensitive case materials without anyone looking over my shoulder. I paid $1,850 for this seat because it's necessary for my work. Webb tried to form words, but nothing came out. His hands were trembling slightly. Chen cleared her throat. "Ma'am, I didn't know you were—" Dr. Johnson cut her off with a look that could freeze fire. "You didn't know because you didn't ask. You saw a black woman in first class and you assumed I was the problem. You looked at my valid boarding pass, which matched my identification perfectly, and still chose to threaten me with removal. You told me you people always have an excuse, like I'm some kind of criminal, instead of a federal prosecutor who has dedicated her career to fighting the exact kind of discrimination you just demonstrated." The woman in 1B was still recording, her phone steady and pointed directly at the scene. At least 6 other passengers had their phones out now. This was being documented from multiple angles, every word captured. Mitchell tried to recover. "Ma'am, perhaps there's been a misunderstanding. If we could just—" "There's no misunderstanding," Dr. Johnson said, her voice cold and precise, the same voice she used delivering closing arguments. "Your protocol doesn't include racially profiling paying passengers, and my being a federal prosecutor doesn't change what you did. It just means you picked the wrong person to discriminate against, because I know exactly what institutional racism looks like. I prosecute it for a living." She shifted her attention to Chen. "You boarded this plane already treating me like a criminal. You dismissed my valid boarding pass. You ignored multiple passengers telling you I'd done nothing wrong. You threatened a woman for recording evidence of your bias. You ordered me to deplane even though I had broken no rules and violated no policies. You were prepared to physically remove a federal prosecutor from this aircraft because your colleague made a racist assumption, and you backed him without question." Chen had no response. She looked at the floor. Dr. Johnson turned back to Captain Mitchell. "And you emerged from that cockpit and made your decision in 5 seconds. You didn't ask for my side. You didn't—" Dr. Johnson sat back down in seat 1A, placed her credentials on the tray table in front of her, and opened her laptop. "This flight is leaving on schedule. I'm staying in my seat. If you try to remove me, you'll be forcibly removing a federal prosecutor who has broken no laws and violated no regulations. Every phone in this cabin is recording. Make your choice." Gate Supervisor Kenneth Walsh boarded the aircraft within 90 seconds of being radioed about a federal official involved in a passenger dispute. He was a 22-year airline veteran who had seen nearly everything, but when he walked into first class and saw Captain Mitchell, Security Officer Chen, and Flight Attendant Webb all standing around a seated black woman with Department of Justice credentials visible on her tray table while multiple passengers recorded on their phones, he knew this was a career-ending disaster. "Someone explain what happened here," Walsh said, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. 7 passengers started talking at once. The businessman handed Walsh his business card and offered to provide expert witness testimony. The woman in 1B showed him the video she'd recorded of the entire interaction from start to finish. Another passenger had written down timestamps and direct quotes. Walsh watched 45 seconds of the video and his face went rigid. He turned to Webb. "You're done. Get off this aircraft immediately and report to my office." Webb's eyes went wide. "But I was just trying to maintain cabin standards." "Get off now," Walsh cut him off. "You've created a federal incident involving a Department of Justice prosecutor." He looked at Chen. "You're also being reported to your supervisor and to TSA oversight. Leave." 4, Dr. Johnson repeated. "I let it go because I was exhausted from trials and didn't have the energy for confrontation. But today, your employee didn't just question me, he lied about me being disruptive. He called security, he tried to have me removed, and your captain and your security officer backed him without evidence, without investigation, without even pretending to care about the truth." She pulled out her phone. "I'm filing a formal complaint with the Department of Transportation under Part 382 of the Air Carrier Access Act. I'm filing a federal civil rights lawsuit under 42 U.S.C. Section 1981. And I'm requesting a full DOJ investigation into discriminatory practices at this airline, including a review of all complaints filed by passengers of color over the last decade." Walsh nodded slowly. "You'll have the full cooperation of our legal department." "I don't want cooperation," Dr. Johnson said coldly. "I want systemic change. I want every complaint filed by Black passengers, Asian passengers, Hispanic passengers, Muslim passengers, every minority passenger over the last 10 years reviewed by an independent third party.
I want mandatory anti-discrimination training with real consequences for failure. I want independent oversight with teeth. And I want financial consequences significant enough that your airline never, ever ignores this problem again. The flight departed 52 minutes late. By the time it landed in Atlanta, the video had been uploaded to social media by 3 different passengers. Within 8 hours, it had 5 million views. Within 24 hours, it had 18 million. Within a week, 58 million. The hashtag #FlyingWhileBlack was trending nationally. Major news outlets picked up the story. Civil rights organizations issued statements. Congressional representatives called for DOT investigations. Marcus Webb was terminated within 36 hours for violation of company anti-discrimination policy and federal civil rights laws. After 8 years with the airline, he received no severance and no pension. He was effectively blacklisted from the aviation industry. No other airline would hire him. The video followed him everywhere. Dr. Johnson used her settlement money to establish a legal defense fund for victims of travel discrimination and consulted with airlines, hotels, and other hospitality companies on civil rights compliance. Marcus Webb was 44 when he was fired. He never worked in aviation again. He took a job in a warehouse making $16 an hour. The video never stopped following him. Dr. Amara Johnson continued her federal prosecution career and was promoted to Deputy Assistant Attorney General in the Civil Rights Division. She still flies first class. Airlines treat her with particular care now, terrified of becoming the next viral discrimination story. The lesson was expensive and public. Assumptions about who belongs where based on skin color don't just hurt people. They destroy careers, cost millions, expose systemic failures, and prove that when you discriminate against the wrong person, justice has a way of being served with precision. If you believe qualified professionals deserve respect regardless of race or gender, share this story. If you've ever been made to feel like you don't belong somewhere you paid to be, your experience matters. And if you think billion-dollar companies should face real consequences for tolerating discrimination, remember, accountability isn't optional, it's essential.